Okay, the Ansar Palace project, what we're doing here is we're building the living module separately from the trailer. The other thing is the living module is so small, there's no bathroom involved. So part of this is to, as a workaround with legal requirements in the state of Oregon over the licensing of RVs and camper trailers, when they're this small. When it's this small, it's under basically, you know, I think it's, if it's under 1.5 tons or something like that, we don't license the trailers. So you can have this with no plates on it legally. In order for it to not be an RV, we're building the trailer and the living module separately, or at least we have the structure of them separately, and they can be separated. There's going to be a separate deck on the trailer which allows the living module to be removed, and then if somebody's off-grid, they're in the middle of nowhere, they can use the living module while they're building a cabin, and then they have a cargo trailer for hauling stuff around, because with a 4x8 cargo trailer, you'll end up with the bed capacity of a mid-sized pickup truck, like let's say a Toyota T100 or a Dodge Dakota. You know, like a half-ton, they call them a half-ton pickup truck, but a short bed, regular pickup truck, you know, should work. It will be more capacity than what you get out of like a, you know, Ford Ranger, or Toyota Tacoma, or something like that. Now, these trailer frame kits available from Harbor Freight, depending on how you play the coupons, you're going to pay anywhere from $300 to $400. Maybe a little over that, depending on the licensing and sales tax and things like that where you're at. Here in Portland, Oregon, we can get unusually good deals on these because of the way we don't have sales tax in this state. We don't have to license these, and we can get local coupons for a discount. So it works here where I can actually sell one of these ready to build on for less money than what people in other states will pay for the kit, especially by the time they're done paying sales tax and shipping. So one of the things we've noticed, though, I noticed very early in the game, this is about the 4th one of these that I've built, is that if all you do is follow the instructions and bolt it together, it's still not very rigid. There's a lot of sliding that can happen. You can pinch this together really well with tightening up the bolts, but it still, you know, it still wants to slide around a little bit. Just a little bit of movement here can translate into a fair amount of deflection when we're pushing on one corner but not the other, and then that in turn will start to loosen up the other bolts and screws, because they'll start grinding into the paint around the little holes that were drilled here. It'll start pressing and pushing and getting this kind of loose. So if you're really going to do a major weld reinforcement, you do this both right side up and upside down. You flip it upside down, you weld both ends. This one, I don't think it's going to be that necessary, because it's going to spend most of the time with a rigid box on there. But what you can do in some builds is do the weld reinforcement around here. You notice how the weld reinforcement goes. These two get pinched together because these are two 4-foot square sections that have been connected by bolts plus the structure of this bar here. And then you end up with a much more rigid construction. Of course, you could flip it upside down and weld it some more. I don't think I'm going to do that on this build, because it's going to have a structure on it most of the time. I don't think it's necessary. The other time it's not necessary to go crazy with the welding is when you're adding more steel to the trailer. When I use these as a straight cargo trailer, I tend to add more steel to them, one way or another. The only one that I've built in the last few years that I did not do added structural steel plus welding was the solar generator trailer. I wanted to see how one of those would go if we just did the bolting according to the original instructions, and that thing started to want to rattle apart. And so one small advantage of that was it was a little springier and a little bit more forgiving off-road. Okay, so if it's a little more flexible and springier, it is a little more forgiving off-road. If we're doing this type of work and it's more rigid, I just think it's stronger. I think it's going to work a little better for most people's purposes most of the time. So with this type of reinforcement, we've got, as I press on this corner, you'll notice that the far corner will move a little bit, but it moves in the other direction, right? We can wiggle that. So it would become more rigid if I added more steel, but I think it's also far more rigid than it was before I did any welding. As we build the cargo trailer, this will just be a flatbed cargo trailer and the living module separately. The game plan is that if somebody does go live off-grid, or let's just say they're setting it up in a suburban property or even a small urban backyard, they can separate the living module from the trailer and still have a cargo trailer to do work, okay? And it'll be a nice heavy-duty reinforced cargo trailer they can do to work with. If we want to reinforce it at a later date, of course, we can flip it over and put some weld in. But yeah, I don't know if it's really all that necessary for the type of things this is going to be end up using. And of course, the parts are relatively commonly available. What's interesting is the US-made trailer axles that are in this capacity that use this type of a hub, the 1-inch non-tapered hub setup on there, they cost the same. So whether you get the US-made one or the Chinese one, the axle sets cost the same. The living module we're going to keep working on. We're going to skin it. The sides needed to be structural. Okay, that holds all that up. We're going to skin this in aluminum a little bit later today, and of course you'll see that video tomorrow. So here we are with a living module attached to the trailer. Now, what I did was a sheet of pressure-treated plywood on the trailer, so the trailer has a separate deck from the living module. The living module is removable, but we're going to be showing the removal and reinstallation process later in the video, because we have to have build-outs here and the lowering jacks and all that kind of stuff. A big deal today has been working on the door. Yesterday we did the paint, did most of the top work, which will be tidied up a little bit. Fairly thick aluminum, and the two are not overlapping. I decided to go with a weld. Now there's a couple little pinhole holes in that, not much. That's easy enough to seal with glue, and I prefer to liquid nails or something that stays semi-flexible over time to use that as a sealer, but those are welded instead of overlapped. And of course you can see it's bubbled up in a few spots, but when we bolt the roof rack on, that bolt is going to run all the way through the into the 2x3s and cross beams on there, so that's going to be fine. We've got studs. The walls are up before the studs are put in, which isn't that big of a deal, and they're glued in place, so we don't necessarily need up-down screws like you would on a conventional header. The idea, though, is that it's screwed and glued in order to keep the walls from bowing one way or the other. This is made to give the door opening a lot of structural integrity against the same 3/4 inch plywood cutout piece that was right here. And we'll set this up so that there's trim on the outside plus the lip on the inside, so when this door slams, it's a good, healthy, solid feeling thing. And then to keep it from warping, I'm going to put metal reinforcement rods on there, which will probably have like coat hooks or something on them. There'll be something functional to it, perhaps on the outside too. Now, this is going to be kind of primarily an urban use thing, so we're not real strong on windows. If you want a view, then you need to go outside. We're going to put sideways facing skylights in. I know there were some comments where people are thinking overhead. The problem is that invites leakage. The sideways facing stuff is much less of an issue, and we'll show that in an upcoming video. More cross bracing here so that as we shake the trailer, notice the whole thing moves, it doesn't deflect it. I got to attach those hinges, obviously. Now this is going to be a mobile office, so of course it's being used as that right now. And the trailer hitch getting modified, I set this back a little bit so that these can pinch together. And then where that's a tilt mechanism for a lot of this stuff, that's all by pinching it in. See, it pushes this all over to one side, gives me a little more surface area to weld those on. But I'll leave the pins in place because they're part of the structural integrity of that. Up here, because there's going to obviously always be a sealing issue at the front, we use extra glue and we kind of push it into the cracks and seams and all that, because if this wood wants to start delaminating, of course it starts at the edges. We're going through a lot of trouble to make sure this stuff all gets sealed even before we attach the next piece on. And so it's going to be, you know, able to take a lot of punishment going down the road or being bounced or jostled around. And that's what you wouldn't get if you were just repurposing a large shipping crate. This is all screwed and glued. Sometimes I would use nails, like if I was double laminating something, because by the time that glue cures, the nail doesn't really matter. Okay, and we hit that from both ends, so that it's you know, it's going to be a very strong corner on each one of these. It's almost like timber construction. The reason for that is, let's say you get to a destination, you remove the living module from the trailer, and then use this as a basis for another little cabin or alternative method construction structure. You could lean other things on it, you could attach other things to it, and know that there's a lot of, you know, a lot of beefiness on these corners that could hold more than just its own weight.